Hey, what's up YouTube? It's Chickens here, back again with another Animal Crossing video. So in this video I'm going to be going over some tips and tricks on how to decorate around the outside of your villagers' houses. So starting off, tip number one is before you start anything is to get to know your villagers' personality. Getting to know their personality helps you better select a theme for their area, so I'll show you an example here. So if I run up to Benedict's house, as you can see his area is a farm type of area here. So if you run inside, so you can see Benedict, he's a chicken, so I decided to put a little farm around his house. He also has like a little, every time he talks to me, he talks about like, I don't know, bugs and like kind of weird stuff like that, so farming type of stuff. So I decided to put his house in a farm type of area. So working with that, so tip number two is also to look at the interior of the house to find out their theme and also to select the right furniture. So as you can see here, Benedict has a dirt floors, some fruit furniture here. So I felt like it was best to put him in a farm area. And outside of his house, I do have an orchard here to work in with the inside of his house. Alright, so tip number three is to try to give your villager adequate space. So you could give them a huge area like this I have with Benedict, or you can see here. I'll run over to Gonzo's house real quick. So as you can see here, this is Gonzo's space. So Gonzo has a really big area. If you saw my time-lapse video, me building my Zen garden, this is where Gonzo's house is. So just using his personality and his theme, he's a cranky villager. So I decided to put his house in a Zen garden because I feel like it'd probably be better for him to be away from everybody. But yeah, it's just a really big area for Gonzo to just have his house in. But I get if people don't have like huge areas for their villagers. So another example is you can use some tiny yards here. So this is Amelia's house. She has my smallest yard so far. You can just have like one space around. And then you also have Shep's house, this is a medium size. And then back over here. So back over here we have Twiggy and Marina's yards. They are a little bit larger. Well, I feel like the more space you give them, you can add more furniture to like accurately reflect their personality and just how the villager is. Alright, so moving on to tip number four. So tip number four is to use the outside of your villager's house to decide your color scheme. So as you can see here, Twiggy's house is a white wall and a yellow roof. So for a color scheme, I use white little fencing here. I use yellow tulips and pink tulips just to working with their theme. So using a color scheme that matches the outside of her house gives like her whole yard more continuity. It feels like it all matches like really well because it would make sense here to have like blue and purple flowers next to a white and yellow house. It would look kind of ugly and out of place. So it's best to use the house's exterior to guide you in deciding your color scheme around your villager. And working in with that, tip number five is to place villagers with similar themes and color schemes next to each other. So as you can see here, we both have Twiggy and Marina's house next to each other because they both have a pink type of theme, a pink and white, and a cute little type of theme I'm going for here. So because Marina and Twiggy both have a pink and white type of theme here going with them, Twiggy's a little bit different because she has yellow here, but they're kind of similar, so it makes sense to put their houses next to each other. Because it wouldn't make sense if I had like Twiggy's here is like a pink and like white theme, and then I have like, I don't know, Roll's house is black and blue. It would look kind of ugly and out of place, so it feels like it's best to like have matching areas with each other. And it gives like the entire landscape just more continuity, just because like you aren't going from one theme to another just like every few steps. You're just having like one like nice big area with a nice like concise theme to it. Alright, for tip number six is to use the right path that leads up to their villager's door. So as you can see here, Twiggy's house is white, so I have a white little wooden path here. And then same thing with Marina's house here, she has a white wall, so I decided to put white pathing here. Alright, so going in with the pathing tip number seven is to choose the right fencing. So for the fencing, you're also going to try to use the exterior of the house here. So as I said before, Shep has beige walls and dark wood exterior highlights. So I felt like here country fencing would work the best. So for another example of this, let's run down to Twiggy's house real quick. So as you can see here with Twiggy's house, she has a white wall, and then so I decided to use white fencing. Same thing with Marina's house. So choosing the right fencing is really important because you have to make sure it matches the whole area. And finding the perfect fencing just makes the area just like that much better in the end. So tip number eight is to use trees and bushes in between every few pieces of fencing here. So as you can see here, like every one piece of wood stakes I have a tree or a bush. So adding these makes like the whole border seem a lot more dynamic instead of just having like just a square with fence around it. It looks kind of boring. So adding trees adds a really nice vertical element, as well as adding bushes adds like a more like dynamics to it. It also makes it a little bit more colorful when the bushes are in season. So tip number 9 is a really easy tip. So just add flowers. So adding flowers, especially hybrids, use just make the area a lot more colorful. So it makes it a lot more prettier to look at instead of just having just plain grass and furniture around. It makes it a lot more colorful. Alright, so finally for tip number 10 is you want to use the right furniture outside of their house. So this works from all the previous tips. You want to get to know the villager's personality. You want to work with the outside of the color scheme of their house. So as you can see here as an example, I decided to use a pizza oven outside of Shep's house because he's an Italian sheepdog, and also I chose the white one just because it matches the roof. And just next to that, I decided to add some white stools and a white table just to match the color of the roof. And also on top of that, I decided to add the gold dishes just because Shep is a smug villager, so he's into like kind of like the bougie stuff, so I decided to put that there. Alright guys, so those are my 10 tips for designing the outside of your villager's houses. So just to wrap up and recap. So tip number 1 is to get to know your villager. Tip number 2 is to use the inside of their house for inspiration. Tip number 3 is to give them adequate space. Tip number 4 is to use their house's exterior to try to figure out your color scheme. Tip number 5 is to place villagers with similar themes next to each other. Tip number 6 is to choose the right pathing. Tip number 7 is to choose the right fencing. Tip number 8 is to use trees and bushes. Tip number 9 is to incorporate flowers around the little yard area. And finally, tip number 10 is to choose the right furniture. So hopefully you guys can use these tips and tricks when designing the outside of your villagers' homes. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. Make sure to subscribe to my channel for more Animal Crossing content, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out.